Okay, good evening. I was at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum Wednesday for most of the day, and here's a picture of the record. I collect vinyl records. This is a gold record for um, Voyager Sounds of Earth. It's a duplicate of it out in, I think it's Voyager 1. And let me um, get to my main concern right now, which is to sort of account for the history of my self-publishing, doing it as a lone wolf. I talked about my status in the world as a lone wolf previously. Remember that the books, well, this is the third of the books, but remember that the books started in 1997 with an initial printing of the first book, and then it went to POD in 2000. And my main concern with the Do Ask, Do Tell series was the parallel between the concern of people being forced into intimate spaces by sex and being gay, and that the parallel between that in a dorm when I was thrown out of William and Mary in '61, and then the debate over gays in the military as it came up in 1993 with Bill Clinton, and then Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally repealed in 2011. And then that's not quite the same as the debate over trans in the military now. That's still a different issue. But that this whole idea of forced intimate people and living, not always choosing to be put into situations of forced intimacy, sometimes having to accept it, leads to a lot of discussion of other kinds of policy issues, um, including, having children, birth rate, um, family responsibility, family values, filial responsibility for people who don't have their own children, which I wound up in, and free speech and freedom of reach, and then all the kinds of issues around the internet that I talked about for years, and even trademark, the use of trademark when you're talking, but maybe aren't really running a business, which is the kind of the issue that I ran into. Um, and then So just running through it. In 1997, there was an initial printing of the first book, and I'll go and this is this is what the Do Ask Do Tell site is now, and then went to POD in 2000, and in 1998, I actually put all the text online and didn't require people to sign on. I just allowed people to watch it. Um, I didn't really expect, and of course you could either buy the physical copies or you could buy it on Kindle. I didn't make an issue out of selling a lot of copies. I did sell out the first printing, which was about 400 copies. But then when it went print on demand, it had gotten a lot slower, as most books do. I came out with a second book at the end of 2002, about a year after 9/11, and then a third book in 20 at the start of 2014, um, mostly about the free speech angles that came out of the basically working with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, basically that angle. But at the time, I didn't even mention trans or gender identity in that book. It wasn't being discussed yet. And then there was this booklet, Our Fundamental Rights, the end of 1998 that's run out of print. There was another little intermediate booklet before this one in 2000 that this one just simply replaced. Um, and to show you, to go back to this and show you um, there were websites. It was called High Productivity Publishing, and then starting in 1997, and then I got another domain actually called Do Ask, Do Tell in 1999 in December, and that's kind of what the homepage looked like. And here's some different, I actually had 7 a.m. news on it, and I had different things on it. I had book reviews, movie reviews, and various essays about subjects all flat files in HTML. And then when I came back, left, got laid off, came back to DC at the end of 2003, kind of floundered around a little bit with some substitute teaching and a lot of stuff went on with that. I started using Blogger at the start of 2006, and you can look at the first one looked like this, and you could actually see, like this was in 2009, you could actually see I was keeping track of the most recent blog postings I'd done on Palm Center, movie reviews, book reviews, internet speech overseas, comparing the U.S. to overseas, issues for teachers and how teaching could compare to the military, how Don't Ask, Don't Tell could affect the civilian job market, security clearances, that was a big issue, filial responsibility was a big issue. I discussed all kinds of issues. Debt ceiling, economic issues. I talked about the debt ceiling a lot because that became an issue in 2011 later. And then it had two other incarnations. And this is what it looked like for a number of years. I had all the blogs, the Do Ask, Do Tell domain. I had all the blogs, all 16 of them from Blogger lifted here, and then the 4 I had on WordPress, which was in 2014 and 2016. And then all the content in HTML format was on this side of the web page. And then in 2021, I started removing stuff. That's not the right one. In 2021, that's that's right. When I removed a lot of stuff, at the start of 2022, I still showed what I kept. And then at the end, by the middle of 22, I was down to just having 2 websites, which were one in my legal name, which was johnwbushka.com. I seem to have not, I thought I had that set up. I don't know. Let me just show that. I thought I had set it up. Yeah, this. And which has everything. And then the blog, which I'm going to give you the link to. And I'm going to give you a link to the web posting that explains this video. I'm going to give you specifically a link to the web posting that explains this video and gives you a lot more detailed history. And so I had those, just the blog, one blog left, and then one site left. And then I had the YouTube page, and that was about it. So I scaled down, and the biggest reason I scaled down is there was a lot of criticism. I wasn't really running a business. I was just offering content, and if I didn't have my skin in the game, this is Talib's book in 2018, Skin in the Game. If you didn't really start a business and face all the real problems because you had money accumulated or because you had inherited money that wasn't really legitimate or acceptable anymore, you were possibly just stirring things up and stirring people up who felt aggrieved and who might create instability. You were just introducing instability by questioning things all the time and making some people wonder why you were doing it if you didn't have the same responsibilities that they have. And so I get that, and that you really needed to join in the game, which means today, though, if you want to be involved in issues, it seems like you have to take a side. And right now, neither side is very acceptable to me. I'm certainly Trump. I'm certainly very concerned about the legality of Trump's behavior. I'm very concerned about January 6th and all the pardons and all the threat. You're hearing about this all the time. I particularly like Brian Tyler Cohen's channel, if you want to look, one particular channel I like, but and many others. But the left, gave us gender ideology, which is extremely problematical, and I've talked about that in a lot of other videos, and I can't go into that today, but we all know why it's so problematical. And the left was becoming very authoritarian and trying to shut down free speech too. And the practical matter was, for me, I might have been better off with Trump in office than with the left staying in office. That was what I was beginning to think. I could be one of the adults in the room for Trump, which I probably am a little bit, because I think Trump knows who I am, from the first administration through some connections. And I could try to stir things into a little more reasonable and sensible path. Yeah, immigration should be legal, and it needs to be cleaned up. And there's a huge problem that we've allowed to develop. That's true. We've allowed a lot of people to be here illegally, and we haven't, and it's caused a lot of problems. And that certainly is true. And some tariffs are needed too, because we in some degree of autarky is probably needed, because of our national security. Raw materials, we may not be able to get the raw materials in the future we need to maintain our standard of living. That's a real serious threat. And there's all issues about solar storms and climate change and all kinds of very serious environmental things don't have a very good handle on. So yeah, you need a strong leader, and you need somebody who actually pays attention to the problems. So, but I'm trying, but because I don't have dependents and I don't really have a business that's really legitimate, and it's harder for me to remain credible. But I'm going to try to make that change with a fourth book, which I'm working on, and hoping to have it ready in early 2026. And then this will clean up a little bit, and I'll be able to show, I'll be able to. So I'm going to show you the screenplay just a minute. With this fourth book, I'll be able to organize everything around it and make the marketing and make it much easier to get books from me directly, and make it easier to there are problems with the way I've used my nickname and the way I use the do, ask, do, tell that I'm concerned about. And I'm not quite sure what the trademarking is going to be. That's become an issue since I was starting to learn about the possibility of having problems around 2018, 2019. And that had something to do with my cutting things back in 2021. In 2022, it started 2022 when I basically restructured everything over 2022 and have just the domain and the blog and the YouTube channel, and that's all I have now. And then also and then the do, ask, do, tell is a second domain, but that's just only a page. It's only this page for Mark. I actually still have this page, so I actually have two domains, plus my John W. Bush here. And so I actually have two domains. But this is really not I really need to make this a lot more effective. But that's going to be much easier if I publish a fourth book. And the fourth book will bring everything up to date, and particularly the gender identity discussion compared to polarities with Paul Rosenfels. And also the fact that there's a connection between that and, when you're asking other people for consideration because you don't fit in as well, and you're asking other people to include you, that has some bearing to even the way we handle gays in the military. It actually does. I have to admit that it does. and I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, I will be restructuring all this probably by early 2026. So bear with me if you would. I've shown you this. I showed you this in December. This is a screenplay for a short film about my William and Mary expulsion called An Expulsion. I went over that on December 26th of 2024. Also in early January, I think it was the 1st and the 5th, I had some videos where I explained some of my issues about about the branding and so forth. I think I talked about that in early January. You can look there too. So that's essentially what I have. I'll give you the link where you can look at the particular blog link where you can look at everything and you can see what all the sites looked like in the past, and you can see how it's traced through history. Knowing the detailed history is helpful in my case. But so that's what I have for today, and I do thank you for listening.